Hey guys, welcome to another movie review. Today I'm talking about the new Five Nights at Freddy's film, Five Nights at Freddy's 2. This is a continuation of that 2023 film that we got 2 years ago. But in this film, you guys, we do kind of follow almost immediately after that first movie. We find Mike, the security guard, who was played by Josh Hutcherson both in this film and the last film, kind of moving on from those events of the first film. He found out Freddy Fazbear was a very dangerous place to work. He found out kind of the identity of the owner and kind of how awful of a person he was and kind of all these crimes he committed. So he's trying to move on with his life, but because his sister, who same actress from the first movie, still has a connection to those animatronic animals from the first movie that were inside the Freddy Fazbear restaurant. She still has a connection to them. She still wants to continue a friendship with them. But because Mike doesn't work for that place anymore, because it's essentially an abandoned pizzeria at this point now too, Mike has no way of getting back inside. He keeps telling his sister that, we got to move on. Let's make some human friends at school. Um, let's just move on with our lives. But Abby's insistent. She really wants to, get in touch with these people. She knows that there's humans inside those animatronics and stuff like that. And so she's not ready to give up on it quite yet. And she's in luck because she has this Freddy Fazbear walkie-talkie type of toy where one night she gets a message from what appears to be from the pizzeria, asking Abby to come back to the pizzeria to help them out. They're in danger and they need her help. And so Abby, not knowing any better, basically runs off in the middle of the night and breaks into the pizzeria to see what's going on with the animatronics. And then that's kind of where the film really starts to take place. You're going to get introduced to a character called the Marionette that really is kind of the mastermind behind the rest of the story taking place. But overall, guys, I liked this new film. I didn't absolutely love it. I will say right off the bat, too, I feel like the Rotten Tomatoes score is very brutal to this film right now. It really is not a 15% bad kind of a movie like the website's making you out to believe. I think this is a much better film than that. Though it is a step down from quality compared to that first Five Nights at Freddy's film, this isn't a bad film. It certainly has its qualities. There's certainly a lot of positives and negatives I'm going to go over with you in just a second here as to things I liked about it, but there is some things I think really could have been improved about it too. So if a Five Nights at Freddy's 3 is ever considered, if we do ever get a third one, there are some things along the way I hope that they're able to fix. Maybe even possibly a different director for the next one, just to kind of mix things up, get a different flavor in there, make things feel a little bit differently. Just my opinion, of course, but I do want to go over some positives and negatives as to why the film works overall, but why there's also some negatives along the way that are going to prevent this from being a terrific film in the long term. But for my positives and negatives of Five Nights at Freddy's 2, I think the sense of atmosphere is really well handled here. I really do like how when you're walking through this abandoned pizzeria, whether it's the first film or this film, you really do get the sense of something creepy, something bad's going to happen to you. There's, these animatronic animals that could pop up at any time and try to harm you. It really does feel like kind of a place from the past just because it is such an old pizzeria with, old arcade machines, old table layouts. Kind of has that Pizza Hut classic retro look to it for those who remember like those classic dine-in feels that Pizza Hut once offered in their restaurants. It kind of has that flavor to it too. But I really like how the film really has a sense of atmosphere. It really gets you kind of scared to go into one of these kind of Freddy Fazbear pizzerias just because there is a lot of danger that could happen in almost every turn. And I think the film and the previous film as well was able to achieve that sense of feeling. And overall, too, I really do like how these Five Nights at Freddy's films, both this film and the last one now, really do kind of have a fun Gremlins haunted house kind of feel to them. It really does feel like you're really not supposed to go inside those places, but you kind of want to see what's inside them. And so I do like how the film does have that sense of, you're not supposed to go in, but the characters have to go in just because the curiosity really is killing the cat here, and they really want to see what's inside this place. And so I do like how the film does have that fun vibe of Gremlins slash haunted house attraction, and it really does feel like it blends both worlds in a very unique way too. I really do feel like the villainous character of the Marionette is very strong here too. Very creepy character, very strongly used here. Um, Without kind of giving too much away, whenever like the Marionette finds a host to, and strengthen her powers in a way, if you want to call it that, Very, very effective stuff here. So whenever kind of the marionette is in action or about to do a jump scare, I do feel like that's kind of when the film's working at its most powerful powers, if you want to call it that, because I really do feel like the marionette villain is a very strong villain for the film. I also like all the attention to detail that the story and the overall film gave of story continuation, kind of everything that we were left off with in that previous film. And I do like the effects of kind of exploring the idea of long term trauma, how kind of one event within a town, within a pizzeria, can kind of shape a whole town once something happens. So they really do kind of explore kind of the origins of the Freddy Fazbear restaurant and how more of them managed to get made, how when more of them got made, there were some safety protocols that happened, how, it kind of involved Matthew Lillard, but it kind of didn't involve him either. So the film does kind of go over some long-term stuff, some long-term trauma-related things, whether it's to characters, whether it's to the Freddy Fazbear Pizzeria in general. And overall, I just like the overall attention to detail that the film gave as far as why certain places and people experience the trauma that they do. I also liked the overall build up to the suspense that the film had. There's like these ghost hunter tapes that get filmed for this TV show throughout the movie. Mckenna Grace is kind of the leader of that group for whenever they kind of go back to her. I really like the kind of the build up to the suspense. I like how they're kind of going through these Freddy Fazbear restaurants and they get like this guy to give them a tour. And it really is effective as to how they're building up the suspense and the scares. And so whenever those scenes are happening, I thought the build up to the suspense was really good in those scenes as well. And overall, too, I feel like the film's scale is much larger than the first film. So that is one thing that I feel like the sequel does manage to do better than the first film, is do a bigger story than what that first film was doing. So I do like the sense of going into these Freddy Fazbear restaurants and taking the animatronics out, letting them kind of explore the real world, and you'll know what I mean when you see the film. And so there really is kind of a bigger scale to it. There really is more to just people that are aware of these abandoned pizzerias, and now the animatronics have a way of getting out into the real world if they choose to, and how that can potentially expand the world even further once again if they decide to go ahead and make a third film if they decide to go that route. But for my negatives of Five Nights at Freddy's 2, unfortunately, the third act of the film is very weak. It kind of is throwing several ideas out in kind of all out at once, it seems like. And I really feel like the overall ending of the film didn't feel very satisfying. It just kind of felt like they were setting up for a potential third film if it ever happens. And it really didn't kind of wrap things up in a satisfying way to make this film feel like its own standalone story. It really just kind of feels like a wrap around to what we might potentially get in a third film if we ever get one. And overall, too, I thought some of the smaller moments felt a little dragged out. There's a moment in the movie where the character of Abby, who's basically the Josh Hutcherson sister, basically gets on her bike to kind of go see what's wrong with the Freddy Fazbear animatronics, and they show her putting on the helmet, going on the bike, going down the street, taking a corner, going through town, going through buildings. It's just like they show everything, and really all they had to do in the editing process was make the point that she snuck out of the house, got her bike, and went to the pizzeria. That's really all they had to do. And so they kind of, there's certain moments like that where they just kind of drag it out as long as they possibly can. I don't know if it was a runtime thing or what was going on with that, but there are some moments that are kind of dragged out like that where you see the helmet go on, they turn the corner, they go down to the town, they go through the houses, they go through all this, and it's just like we really didn't need all that information just to make the point that it was one character going from that place to this other place. And there's a lot of times like that where the film does weird editing choices like that that really kind of confuse the audience rather than satisfy them. I also thought some of the, I just thought it was kind of weird how a lot of these abandoned places, specifically these pizzerias, have like no locks on them. So it's just a bunch of people going in and out of these abandoned places at will. While in the first film, it was more so like you had to have permission, you had to have a certain key, you had to do all this other stuff. And so it's kind of weird that Mike was able to kind of have a sense of security in that first film, while in this film, I don't know if they're trying to just make the point that these places are even more abandoned now, but it seems like almost anybody out in the free world can just go into these places now without any kind of key or way of getting in and stuff. So I thought that aspect of the story felt kind of lazy to me. It just felt like any walk of life could go inside these abandoned places, and there's just no sense of locks on them at all. I also thought some of the jump scares and some of the violence being utilized here felt kind of weak. You could definitely tell you were watching a PG-13 film because they would either cut away from the violence or they would do a cheap jump scare or they would, on a scene where it's clearly probably going to be a lot of blood involved. Once again, they cut away so you don't see it. So there is a lot of PG-13 isms to the movie where they cut away right when kind of things get a little interesting in certain moments, and it does feel very censored in a sense. I also thought more of the Skeet Ulrich character could have been applied more. It is one of those characters where we do get to learn a little bit about him, and once we do, we find out some pretty interesting stuff about him too. So hopefully, if we do get a sequel, I do hope we get more of his backstory and kind of what he's going to be a part of in this universe. Because when we do find out more about him, it's some pretty interesting stuff. Unfortunately, he's not in the film for very often, so I thought that aspect of the story was really underwhelming. I also thought more scenes with him and Matthew Lillard together would have been more satisfying too, because it's essentially a Scream reunion for the two of them since they haven't worked together since the first Scream film. So I thought that aspect of the story could have been better handled. They kind of marketed it a lot, so I thought more of Skeet Ulrich could have been a bigger benefit for the film if they chose to go down that path. And overall, too, I really didn't get a sense of status on the Matthew Lillard character because we kind of don't know where he is after the end of that first film. We don't know if he's dead or on the run or what's going on with him. And so most of his stuff is done through flashbacks, unfortunately, of kind of a younger version of himself, if you could imagine that. And just the overall status of the character, I really didn't get a sense of where is he at, what can we expect in the third film, and kind of where's his general health at as a character? Is he dead? Is he on the run or any of that stuff? I really didn't get any of that stuff over the course of this film or even after the post-credit scenes. And also too, there's this evil family-related character. I can't say too much without spoiling it, but there's a character that's related to one of the villains from the first film that's in this, and I thought more could have been done with him too. I thought there was just a lot of scenes where it's clearly well written and effective, but because he's in the film so little, it doesn't have much of an impact on the movie. And then when he does finally show up near the end, there's really not a lot of impact involved because he just kind of disappeared throughout most of the runtime, and it really could have been anything that he could have been up to at that point. But overall, guys, I'm going to give Five Nights at Freddy's 2 an 8 out of 10. I like the film overall. There's things about it that are really enjoyable. I think if you like that first film, I think you'll like this continuation overall. Like I said, a couple of negatives along the way. There is a weak third act. There's a lot of dragged out moments, some weak jump scares, some weak sense of violence. You can definitely tell it's PG-13. More Skeet Ulrich. An overall status evaluation, kind of where Matthew Lillard is at, because I didn't get anything of that over the course of the film. And just more of this evil relative character that we find out a little bit out in the movie that I think could have been better handled. But overall, like I said, it is enjoyable enough where I could send you to see the theater, go to the theater to see this one. Specifically, if you like that first film, I think you'll really enjoy a lot of things in this movie. Much better than Rotten Tomatoes score. I know they really were kind of brutal on this one, but it is an 8 out of 10 for me. I recommend the film, but do go into it knowing that it's not quite as good as the first film. And I think if you set your expectations right in the right place, I think you'll have a fun time here. So it's 8 out of 10 for me. I recommend the film.